Okay, we have this webinar live. Folks will start rolling in. We will get started here in just a few minutes. Hey, everyone, thank you all so much for joining. Give us just a couple minutes to let everybody in the webinar, and then we will get this party started. All right, well, David, you ready to make this happen?
Yes, sir. Ready to go.
All right, let's do it. Well, we got folks in the room. Let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast and good morning to everyone on the West Coast. My name is Max Farrell. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Hound. And I want to thank you all for joining today's webinar to highlight the great work that Averitt Express has been doing to take care of their drivers, leading to improving their driver retention and their engagement. So I'm really excited for this conversation because I get a chance to chat with a friend of mine and David Broyles from Averitt. David is the director of driver services and has been a huge catalyst for building the foundation for Averitt's positive company culture, especially when it comes to their drivers. And so, David, any other details about your background you want to share for the people before we carry on?
No, of course, I've worked with people. I think that's the background, I guess, is the strongest for me. I've been in operations, truckload operations for years, and moved over to the driver services where we developed the driver services organization at Averitt probably 7-8 years ago, something like that. And it's, in anticipation of the driver, the companies were going to need better retention because you don't want as much turnover because there's not as much pool to draw from. So we saw that 7 or 8 years ago, and we started a branch in the company of driver services, and I took that over, and that's what I've been doing recently for the past 7 years, and a lot of different things, but it's been really enjoyable and a lot of fun and never boring.
You always keep it exciting. I swear every time I talk with you, you always have something going on or multiple things going on, but you keep moving forward. So we scheduled this conversation for a few different reasons. For starters, I've known David for several years, and he's had extensive experience using different feedback tools. And he's seen how firsthand offering a real-time feedback mechanism can provide companies with invaluable insight. And our hope today is to expand on how innovative communications can boost retention, reduce turnover, and lead to a better working environment. I know we have current partner companies of Hound listening in, and we want you to use this as an opportunity to see and share new perspectives of how to maximize use of Hound at your perspective. And I know we also have companies out there that may not be using Hound currently, but hopefully this is a great resource for you to hear from a great leader in the industry about how they're approaching driver retention and engagement. While I know that myself and our team are incredibly passionate about the work that we do, we may be a little bit biased. So it's always great to hear firsthand from someone that's in the industry day to day what they're experiencing out there. And so that's why we're really thrilled to have David on board. Now, this is a Zoom webinar. It's a virtual event. So, as we discuss strategies that are likely relevant to the work you do, we definitely welcome your comments and contributions throughout the presentation. We do have that handy dandy Q&A function down there in Zoom. So if you have a question throughout, please make sure to ask. We'll cover them at the end of our conversation today. And then if you have any sorts of comments you want to add during the presentation, please jump in and share in that chat function, and we'll roll that way. So getting started, we're going to cover a couple of different things today. David, when we caught up recently, you shared that Averitt has always been focused on boosting retention, innovating communications, and increasing driver satisfaction. And we're going to dig into a few of these things throughout today's conversation. We met, gosh, I think it was 6 years ago, right around when Hound first started. But you actually didn't start working with us until last year. And so I think it'd be helpful for folks to hear our story of connecting. Can you share a little bit about how you first connected with Hound and what that experience was like?
Sure. I met Max at a recruiting and retention conference that I went to in Nashville, and we were somewhat introduced to another party of somebody that does some marketing for Averitt Express, and said, "Hey, you may want to talk to Max Farrell. He's got something really going on at Hound." So Max and I met, and we sat and talked for a while. At that conference, we were out in the hotel talking, And, I really listened, and I was, I knew they were pretty new, brand new. And so I said, I don't know about the tech part. That's the part that really hung me up in the beginning was, hey, your tech stuff. And I just thought, I'm not sure. I'm going to sit back and watch Workhound and kind of see what they do and keep in contact. We'll see if they're the real deal or not. And so that's really what I did. And I kept touch sales guys, and I actually went to Chattanooga once, twice to the headquarters pre-COVID. And, we talked a lot. And I kept asking questions. How are y'all doing? What's going on? And I could see the company was growing and healthy. And the people that they were working with appeared to be very satisfied with what they were doing. So I was kind of keeping an eye on them. And then last year, I went to Mac Jacob and I said, hey, I think we're ready to do something here. And here's my ideas. Here's what I'd like to do. And they've been so accommodating, and it's really, really been a plus. So that's kind of how we got to the point to where we're in Workhound. And I've gotten to know Max, and I've gotten to know, like I said, met Max 7 years ago, but gotten to know other people Workhound, and it's been a good relationship so far. It's been great. But that's kind of the background on how we got to where we are today.
I really appreciate you sharing it. It's certainly been a lot of fun. And, I think early on, even when I did my first ride along with a professional driver right before we started Workhound, it became clear to me that trucking is a people business. And that's been one of the most rewarding things of this journey for us is getting to meet good people like yourself and help companies become a better version of themselves in the process. Now, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is that you've tried different initiatives throughout the year. I think you're always experimenting, which but it fits very well with our company values of especially our company value of win or learn.
Right.
And so given your commitment, I think you always said your goal is to add one extra thing a year. And so I'm curious, why did you choose Workhound to help on the retention goals?
Well, when I looked at everything, and you're right, I look at multiple things, usually in the first part of the year to look and say, hey, is there something I can do this year? And I know I'm not going to move the needle 10% or anything like that anymore with where our numbers are on turnover. But I'm always looking to see, okay, does that fit the culture? Can I make something fit? Will it work at Express? So you're right. I go back and I say, hey, what can I do this year to help move the number again or keep the number from going up? That's also important. I don't want to see the spikes. I want to keep it stay level. So we have been through a lot of stuff over the years. I've done a lot of different stuff with different companies and a lot of good companies, really good companies that I've worked with in the past. But when I looked at Workhound, I got over the part about whether it was a text or not, and it's really a link. And what I really like is that it's data that comes in every day. I get the data and I get to look at it, and it's actionable data, and it's fast for me to be able to look at it and say, hey, yeah, there's an issue. Let me resolve the issue. And I get I can save a driver then. I know I saved the driver because I got that feedback and I found out, hey, the driver wasn't happy. And we do a lot of things communication. And, something you said earlier about communication, just a word or two about communication. When somebody asks me what's the number one thing for retention? And I always answer this question and I say, it's clearly cliche, but it's communication is the key to it. Communication is the key to all retention. And what I'm always looking for is ways to improve communication to the driver and or from the driver. And any communication is good, but you got to find ways to make it effective for you. And what I found about Workhound is it's really effective communication coming back from that driver. And we're able to communicate to them we communicate multiple ways back out to the driver, but Workhound tells me what I need to be communicating. And I look at that, I look at the trend, look at how many answers and how many responses I got. What is there trends in those responses? And it tells me if I need to change stuff or if I'm communicating stuff through a podcast, hey, that's something I need to talk about because drivers have issues. Workhound has something that's unlike, I think, all the other companies that have other things that we did. Surveys, I've done surveys for years, and there's nothing wrong with surveys. Don't get me wrong, surveys are fine. But if I compare surveys to Workhound, the differences are a driver gets a link and he can go anytime he wants to, and he can go and he's basically going to spend 2, maybe 3 minutes in that response. How's he doing? And then 2 or 3 minutes maybe on a type of response, and it's done. In the world today, we always get requests for surveys. I get them all the time from different companies. Hey, would you do this survey? Would you do this survey? And usually you'll do if you go into it, you'll link it. It'll go 5 or 6 questions, and that'll link you to another 5 or 6 questions. The next thing you know, you're 10 or 15 minutes into that survey. Drivers really want to be able to get in and then get out. So you get the feeling of the driver, you get the feel of that driver, and drivers stay engaged because they know they can use it anytime they want to. If they're happy today, that's great. They respond, hey, everything's great, loving the business. I'm Friday. And the surveys, when you look at them, they're great. They provide information, but it's not as immediate and it's not as actionable. And I think the drivers, what I like about WorkHound more than anything, is drivers get engaged and stay engaged. And that gives us a lot of feedback that we can use by having that information. So that's the biggest thing I really, really like about WorkHound is immediate data, actionable data, and I can measure myself. When I say myself, I'm talking about driver services.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And one of the questions naturally that we get from following something like that is people wonder, how does WorkHound work? And so I know we have a few folks on here that are familiar with WorkHound, that are actively using WorkHound, but there may be a few folks that are new to what we do. And so I want to share a little bit of background. And so for trucking companies like Averitt, our focus at WorkHound when we're working with trucking companies is to help them and their workers create a trustworthy real-time feedback loop, as you see in this image. Every week, we're asking workers how they feel about work and why. And we want them to share the good, the bad, and the ugly, because often we don't know what we don't know. And we want our eyes and ears to fill in the blind spots. So each week, workers are receiving a weekly message that's asking for anonymous feedback with a link that's live 24/7. And this means that a driver can complete that anywhere, anytime at their convenience, sharing what's on their mind in 90 seconds or less, as David shared earlier. And what happens is that we then take that feedback and it's constantly reviewed using keyword and sentiment analysis. And each unfiltered comment is then categorized into one of a dozen standardized themes. And we gather this feedback for a few different reasons, but one of the biggest ones is that surveys by nature, they create bias. And with WorkHound, it's not a survey. We ask an open-ended question so people can share their honest concerns, and it's anonymous because we know that there's that fear of retaliation that's out there. And so this format allows workers to share their top priorities so carriers like Averitt can get right to the point, and feedback's presented in a way that it can be acted on quickly at the speed of business. And as David shared, we certainly want to get this information, but we also want to make sure that we close the feedback loop. And given that we're dealing with a multi-generational workforce, we want to have multiple ways to do that. And so over the past 7 years, we've learned that getting feedback's good, doing something about it is better, but telling people what we did, that's the icing on the cake. And it's safe to say that Averitt's done a great job of acting on the feedback and making strategic changes and improving communication during our time working together. And David, I want to loop you in here and bring the conversation to talk about culture.
Yeah, I'm good. And I want to go back to one thing you were talking about, the feedback loop on that previous slide. And I want to mention one thing that I think that WorkHound does that I don't all the other companies I've dealt with don't do what you do. We get assigned a person, and I don't know what you have a title for them. I can't remember what it is, but we have a person that's dedicated to Averitt, and once a week we have a short phone call to go over what he sees on the feedback loop, and that kind of holds everybody accountable. You want to, when you get on the phone with somebody else that's reading all the comments and has guidance for you, you want to make sure you've done all the homework. So you want to make sure you read all the comments and you're looking at it. So I really like that. I like the involvement. It's a 10 or 15 minute call, but it really gives a different perspective. Our guy's Jerome. So when Jerome looks at the comments, he's got a little different perspective maybe than somebody from Averitt, because like you said, Averitt, we may be biased, where Jerome has a little different thing. We get feedback out of Jerome as well. So that's really something that's very strong. I think that you all do that nobody else does, which I really think enhances the ability of the feedback loop. So I just want to talk about that when you were talking a minute ago about showing that slide. I think that's something that y'all do that's really, really, really strong, that I think every customer of yours would probably like, and future customers need to think about that, because it is something that's really good. I really do appreciate that. But talking about the culture, I always, when I mentioned it a minute ago, when I look at things, I say, okay, what fits my culture, what fits the culture for Averitt Express. And, everybody has a different culture. Whatever company you're working for, the culture may be different, but it's all, again, surrounds about communication and how well you can communicate and provide that culture. We want our drivers to feel really comfortable in providing us information. And you have to always fight what you said a few minutes ago, because drivers are afraid sometimes to share data because they're afraid of retaliation. Well, Workhound's all anonymous unless you ask for a reveal when there's something there you think you can do. So I think that helps the drivers, that helps them build trust and know, and also know that we listen to them. I think that's probably one of the things in building the communication and building that trust with us is we've made lots of changes as a result of Workhound in the past year. We read all the comments, we take a look at them, and we have a thing where we work just with the customers on how is the shippers and the consignees and how are they treating our drivers. We've made decisions to drop customers because they aren't treating our drivers right based on Workhound feedback and things we didn't know. We always felt like we knew pretty good, because we call drivers all the time. I got a team of people that call them. We do a lot of communication, but we get stuff from Workhound that we didn't necessarily get when we made the phone calls. And now we're able to see things you mentioned a minute ago, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sometimes drivers won't tell you the ugly if you just pick up the phone and call them, or if I meet them at the service center and run into them, but they will tell me something in Workhound. And really what you're looking for there, you're looking for the trend. Is there more than one person commenting like that at the yard? You really got it. But the positive things that come out of it, sharing that data with the drivers, and we do it a couple of ways. We have podcasts, we have a weekly newsletter that goes out, we have all kinds of stuff. We try to make sure in all that we include changes that we've made recently as a result of Workhound. That way the drivers know what Workhound is, and they'll say, yeah, I said, maybe if I comment about that, I'll be able to get that done, get something fixed, something cleaned up. And there's, even all the communication we do, there's still opportunities, and we didn't hear stuff except we heard it through Workhound. All that provides to our culture, which is driving. It's all about the drivers, making sure that we can keep the drivers and satisfy them as much as possible. And even if we don't change things, we do know maybe we need to communicate why things are the way they are. So it's not saying that if a guy makes a negative comment on Workhound, somebody makes a negative comment, you're not necessarily going to change what you're doing, but it will tell you, hey, maybe I need to find a way to communicate why we do what we do so the drivers can better understand what's going on. And that resolves that comment sometimes. And so we just try to foster a lot of ways to communicate back to us. And Workhound is really fit like a glove right in how we do that.
Awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that, David. And I think the combination of you all collaborating, but also adding in additional ways to communicate with people is key. Sometimes people ask, well, how do we close the feedback loop? And certainly, we work together, we send out a broadcast message, but you mentioned a couple other things you all do in the podcast, the newsletter, but making a commitment to highlighting the changes each time, I think is such a good habit to create. Because then it does create a level of accountability for your team, and it also it gets people in the habit that, hey, when we're getting communicated with, they're going to communicate about what they're doing to make our world better, and that is really impactful. And so
I want to say something real fast.
Of course.
While we're on the topic for a second, Jerome. I talked about Jerome. He's the one we deal with all the time. About 4, 5, 6 months ago, Jerome said, hey, are you all responding to the positive comments, all the positive comments? And the answer was no, we're not necessarily responding to them all. He said, and he made a good suggestion. He said, when someone makes a positive comment, you need to be, if you can, have the time to respond to the positive comment. That way that driver knows he made a positive comment, but we did listen and we appreciate the input. And we started doing that 4 or 5 months ago. And as a result of that, we saw our engagement increase because we went to the positive drivers and told them, said, hey, we appreciate everything you do. Appreciate that comment. Thanks so much. If it was about their fleet manager, said, hey, we appreciate it. Tim's doing a great job and we're going to R plus Tim. And I think that's a big deal. I think being able to do that, and Jerome, I credit Jerome on it because we didn't really think about doing that until Jerome brought that up for us from Workhound, and we started doing that. We saw our driver engagement increase as a result of that. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that's so crucial to share, especially in this particular industry, a lot of companies and a lot of people have a really bad habit of spending all their time fixing what's broken instead of celebrating what's working well. And we got to celebrate those small wins, especially for someone that's a driver manager. That's often, I'd argue, is one of the more thankless jobs in the industry. Being able to go tell them, hey, you're doing some good things, and share that attaboy versus them being fearful that feedback's only used to criticize. It's a huge boost. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up, David. And so I do want to shift over to some of the different initiatives and areas of focus for you all. As you can see, retaining employees or drivers is just as important, if not more crucial than recruiting. So I wanted to explore some of the retention approaches that you all do, like your robust driver services team and your quick intervention tactics. So can you talk a little bit about some of the things you do as far as focusing on great facilities, and then we can jump into customer feedback and all that here shortly. But tell us about some of the specific tactics that have been impactful for you all.
Well, I know, and I forgot the term that y'all use, but we can tailor the message for different things. And we do that every once in a while. We tailor the message just kind of, and again, leave it open-ended. We don't want to get into a position where we're asking about one thing, but we do tailor some of the messaging back and forth. So we like that. We like the answers to come back and, on certain specific topics sometimes. And Jerome's been really good about working with us on that and changing the question up a little bit on Mondays and talking about that kind of thing. And, the Averitt Service Centers, we want to know where the drivers are taking breaks. We want to know if there's an issue with showers or facilities or amenities or whatever there is. So we really focus on that. We look for those kinds of things. And, customer issues, same thing. Are drivers having issues with, maintenance, that kind of issue? We look for that. And when we find something like that, you can tell it, you can tell from the comment that the driver is really frustrated. We ask for a reveal. We'll try to get that reveal back, and then we'll talk to that driver specifically one-on-one. But we've stopped a lot of stuff as a result of WorkHound, that we figured out and said, hey, we're getting too many comments on this, and we're getting it, and we dig into it and we find out, yeah, that driver's right. We need to change that. And what they want. We have facilities, we have about 90 facilities in the Southeast, I guess, and every one of them, as we build now, we always build about a 2,000 square foot driver convenience center, which has TVs, has lounges, has the break room. And, we keep hearing the feedback about how important that is with today, with the way it is to try to park at night thing. So we hear that kind of stuff, and that fuels us to keep going and doing what we're doing, because we know we're doing the right thing. And that's part of it. Take a look at all this stuff and say, hey, are the drivers appreciating what we're doing? Do they like what we're doing? If so, we just need to keep going down that road and make sure we're continuing to make the drivers happy. And so that's really what we do with that. From the driver input. If you want me to talk, you want me to talk some about the customer side, about what we do?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the, I think we'll highlight it again in a couple of slides, but you alluded to it earlier about Averitt using feedback to decide which customers to work with and not. And I think that's powerful, because there's head trash in this industry that says, well, this is the job the customer pays us to do. But instead of just assuming that and watching drivers walk out the door because you have a bad customer, we need to change the narrative and the mindset to say, well, let's use driver feedback data to change the customer experience. And so tell us a little bit about how you've used driver feedback to address some of those customer pain points.
Well, we did a little Max and everybody did a little special thing for us on our input. And we provided it enables us to get input on custom shippers and consignees. And we really pay a lot of attention to comments that come back on that. We really got that smoothed out. It's really coming good now. But we asked drivers, how was their I don't know what to say, relationship, I guess, with that consignee, and how'd it go with the shipper. And, we've gotten things back, and they'll say, it's really dangerous driving around this yard. And we're thinking, what do you mean it's dangerous driving in a yard? Doesn't make any sense, So, hey, we called the driver and we said, hey, where are you at? And tell us what was going on. So he did. And then we've got forward facing cameras on all the trucks. So we pulled the video and it's like, wow, we're putting our driver in a bad position. You know, it's going to create an accident or whatever. So we would call the customer and say, hey, you know, we're getting some feedback here. We took a look at this and we don't think we can, you know, it's good. So, you know, can you clean this yard up? In one case, the answer was, yeah, well, we're probably not going to change it. And we said, okay, at the end of the week, we're not going to pull your freight anymore. You know, we don't want to put our drivers in a position where a customer can run the driver off. If the driver does everything he's supposed to do, consignees and shippers, they need to understand that the driver is an important part of the company, and we can't let those folks drive our people off and afford to quit. So we take a look at it. We call customers and we'll tell them, say, hey, look, we've had X number of comments. Here's some of the comments we've had from our customers, and we'll share the data with the customer. And in some cases, a lot of cases, the customers will say, hey, we understand. Let us try to make it better. And that's really good when that happens. You know, if you can reach out to a customer, a shipper, or consignee, and you can say, hey, you know, the folks at the shipping or receiving are really mistreating the drivers. You know, they're not letting them use the facilities, use the restrooms, whatever it happens to be. We've reached out to those customers. Those customers say, hey, give us a chance to fix it. We didn't realize we were having a problem. So we share that data. And that's really great when you get the customer on your side, and then you get the change, and then the drivers see it when they come in. They say, wow, it's not like that anymore. So, you know, Workhound expands with the data, not just taken internally necessarily. We're sharing it with other people that we think we need to change to make it a better service for our drivers.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I appreciate you sharing that. And so we did talk a little bit here about with how you're improving feedback or improving driver experience with customers. Are there other partners that Averitt has where you've been able to improve the driver experience? Whether that's, I think with customers, you've certainly done some things, but also with your own facilities. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we do this. We measure our own facilities the same way we do the customer. We get that input from y'all about specifically from Averitt facilities, and we ask a lot of questions. I mean, we anticipate getting feedback, and we do. Number one, were the Averitt associates at that facility, were they professional? Did they treat you with respect? Did they do all the right things? That's the first thing we want to know. We want to make sure that our associates are making sure all associates get treated the same. Truckload driver, supply chain driver, LTL driver, anybody, we want everybody treated the right way. And so that's one of the things we look for feedback. We also look for cleanliness. Are the amenities right where they need to be? Is there something we're missing? Do you not feel safe at night? Is it not a good place to get to for some reason? Is there things we are not aware of that we generally take care of on an Averitt property? We want to know all that about Averitt property, and the same thing with the equipment. And that information, we take it back. You know, if we've got an issue at one of the service centers with attitude or something like that, you know, I take that back, and me and the service center director have a discussion about the comment. And you know, they're real tuned in, the service center directors are, and they'll reach out and make sure that we get it fixed. So we get a lot of things resolved as a result of that, just by me reaching out to the service center directors and saying, hey, we need some help here. We got things. And it just gets better for the driver.
Yeah, now that's awesome. And you know, I think again, that's a testament to you all thinking about the whole experience at customers, at your own facilities, the communication aspects, dealing with the multi-generational workforce. You know, there's definitely a lot to be admired there.
You know, one thing I want to bring up too that I was thinking about a while ago, Max, when we were talking about this, and you know, the hesitancy sometimes of people to take on a new project like this. For instance, you know, hey, y'all want to use Workhound? And you know, and I was curious, I guess, back when we first started, and we had some conversations. I said, you know, how many man hours is this going to take when I kick this thing off? You know, sometimes people get scared about that when you look at it and say, how big is this? You know?
Yeah.
But it's really not that. It doesn't take much time. You know, I know you all separate the comments for us. You separate them, you know, neutral, negative, whatever. So you do a lot of that front end work for us.
Right.
And then we got the dashboard where we can look at everything. And it's not like you got to go out and hire 10 people. It's not like that at all. You know, once you get everything working, it's really smooth. It doesn't take a lot. You look at it every day, and you deal with what you got to deal with. But it's not something that you've got to go hire people, and it's not something. You know, you can work it into your existing organization. Averitt, we have a driver services organization. I know everybody doesn't. I've had a couple conversations with other companies, and some of them are going to use the leadership that they've got in fleet leadership and some other places. Sometimes it's HR leadership, and I've seen some people talk about using safety leadership. But it's not something. If you're listening today and you're saying, "Well, I don't know if I want to spend half a man a year or whatever you think," it's really not that. It's not as big as you think it is as far as time goes. Your timing, once you get it up and running, your time involvement is minimal. For the feedback you get, the time on it is really a lot less than most projects. I've worked projects with, we've done analytics in the past where we analyze, we used analytics to try to determine who's going to stay, who's going to have an accident, who's not. And we used analytics, but it took a lot longer to narrow in a specific driver. That's what analytics would tell you some issues, but sometimes it was hard to get to that specific driver. Same thing with surveys. Sometimes it's a week before you see the result of a survey. So you're not honing in real fast on what the problem is for that particular driver. That's the reason I went away from some of that stuff. Now we're using Workhound.
Well, yeah, that's a powerful combination.
Are you out or am I out? I think that's part of it. I think, the Workhound really fits with us because it is all about communication and really push it.
And yeah, I think that's a really good segue because if we look at some of the data around how things are going for Averitt using Workhound, there's some compelling results, especially over time as more drivers wind up participating. As of the end of this month, 211 drivers have had some make or break comments, meaning, we could have been looking at an empty truck, of which 93% of those were retained after revealing their identity and directly addressing the issue. And so this is really impressive and deserves recognition because not every company is able to take action immediately when drivers share urgent feedback. And additionally, I think one of the other things that's really awesome about Averitt is that you're supporting what drivers want and need. You've gotten over 4,000 comments from drivers, and it just proves that when you're taking action on quick feedback, it makes a big difference when it comes to retaining your people. So taking into account what drivers have shared in Workhound feedback and changes you've made in addressing these comments, over the past year, how has driver feedback helped sharpen your recruiting and retention strategy?
Our number for the past year was, in 2021 was 49. And we're sitting about that number, a little bit lower right now, going, if I extrapolate it out for the rest of this year. And the turnovers is starting to get higher throughout the industry. And I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be the part that's helping keep the number low on turnover. And I think if you take a look at, the Workhound, it's been a part of that because I'm not using any surveys anymore. I've gotten away from the surveys. I've gotten away from everything. The only third party thing we're using right now is Workhound. And my numbers are creeping down this year, which I think is really strong because in the industry, if you take a look at things, churn is starting to pick up. If you look at the industry in total, I think they're looking for a way to reduce their turnover. If they're not, they probably should be. And, we've expanded in the past couple of months, we've expanded now. We're doing the dedicated fleets at Averitt. We started out with the over-the-road truckload fleet in the past 2 months, I guess. We've now added the dedicated fleet at Averitt. And then first part of next year, we'll take a look at the LTL to see what we're going to do there from there. And we're already doing a lot of things with the things, it's interesting. I guess I forgot how many comments and things that we learned when we first initiated this last year from truckload. So now I'm looking at these comments coming in the last 2 months from the drivers out of the dedicated part of it. And I'm saying, wow, I'm thinking now about the things that we did. I wish we'd have done dedicated last year, but I wanted to kind of get our feet wet, figure everything out, get my arms around it, make sure we could do it, and then go ahead and go the dedicated route. And it's really been a lot of impact already on the dedicated side. Things that we didn't know that we're learning, and we're low on their turnover numbers. As a result of that, we're starting to see drivers get saved, and every driver you save is money in your pocket. The cost versus the cost of using Workhound versus the cost of losing drivers is there's not a comparison there. You ought to choose Workhound. You need to just communicate is the key.
And so speaking on communication and just different initiatives certainly we're thrilled that we get to partner with you all. But I know one of the things that's been powerful for Averitt is a couple of different initiatives like driver advisory councils, or the training and onboarding initiatives that you have, and then also some wellness checkups. And you spoke a little bit about the wellness checkups, but can you speak a little bit about the driver advisory council that you all have in place? Because I think, one of the takeaways companies are looking for in this conversation are new initiatives to try.
Yeah, and the Driver Advisory Council, we've been doing that for about 7 years now. I think their 7th anniversary was in August, and I've got a Driver Advisory Council that comprised of about 16 members, different areas of our regions, where we are at. There are different age groups, there are different driving experience, a lot of different diversity in that meeting group. And we meet about every 6 weeks right now, every 7 weeks, and we run the stuff by the council. Anything that's going to touch the driver, we like to talk to the Driver Advisory Council and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, and what do you think? Give us your feedback from a driver. And it's really interesting to get the feedback. In fact, we had Max and I think Jacob talked to the Driver Advisory Council before we implemented work counts. And we had them present to the Driver Advisory Council, and then we talked about the Driver Advisory Council, and we said, hey, what do y'all think? We want to do that all the time. And what that does, that empowers the driving force, because they know we got, the Driver Advisory Council, for instance, has shirts with the driver on the sleeve. It says Driver Advisory Council. We promote those members as ambassadors so that other drivers will come talk to them and say, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Can you bring this up at the next meeting? Can you talk about this at the next meeting? Well, drivers, it's another way for drivers to have their voice.
But what Dave was talking about there is that they do a driver advisory council, and we did go out and visit, and it was a great experience to go meet those folks in person. And it is awesome to see that you take time to recognize their input, and then whenever you make changes, they speak to, hey, this is input from our driver advisory council and feedback we've gotten out at large. So I think that's really powerful what you guys have done there, David.
Yeah, that's been a great move, and it's really easy to do. It's just a great deal. The other thing we do, the training and the onboarding, we do a lot of that. We meet face to face with every driver with a driver support specialist. We go over issues. We ask if they have any problems. We meet with them all and sit down with them one-on-one versus sitting down with them as a group. We sit down with them one-on-one for every driver that comes in. They meet with one of the driver support specialists out in the field.
Wow.
And they just, we sit down, talk to them, ask them if they got any questions, all their stuff, and they get it answered. There's something else we do is pretty simple too. We have a driver Facebook page that Driver Services is the administrators of. And it's a closed group. It's only for drivers. It's only for Averitt drivers. And that's a really good way to communicate as well. I learn a lot from that by watching what the drivers say. And that's gotten to be a real forum for the drivers. They help each other out. They communicate on that page. If there's a traffic accident on 75 and the lanes are blocked, you'll see it within 2 minutes on Facebook. Hey, 75 northbound, all closed. If a driver can say, hey, I'm up here and I don't know where to park at this customer. 10 drivers will real quick answer the call and say, hey, here's where you park at. Here's how you do it. So we've got a lot of driver-to-driver information going with the Facebook page, which is really good. You get the drivers communicating to each other because drivers like that. And then also we get to communicate, and I communicate immediately with it, and it's the same. I can do a Facebook Live, and it's like me talking to 1,500 drivers. They all get the right information. And the same thing with the podcast that you were talking about earlier. We do a podcast. I've done like 140 of them, I think. But that information goes out to all drivers, and within 2 or 3 days, we'll have 1,200 downloads when I do a podcast. When you get that, they're all getting the same information. It's not like I told one driver who told a driver who told a driver who told a driver. I'm talking to all the drivers, and they get the good information from whoever it is, whatever topic it is, and the guest that I've got in that day. I think that's very important. And so we just keep that going all the time with the podcast. Facebook really works well. And then we have a lot of driver support specialists out in the field to help drivers and train them and work with them on workflow. That's always been a good deal. And the same, the wellness check-ins, I talked about that a minute ago, where we just have the driver support specialists that are at corporate. We have them calling drivers, just doing a wellness call. And like I said,
Well, I know David's talking about the wellness calls, and when he hops back on here, what we'll do is we'll move over to the Q&A. We do have several questions that have popped up here, and we'll make sure to cover as many things as possible. So David, you okay if I pepper you with a couple of questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
All right. So this one came in earlier in the presentation, but first one is that we know that communication is key, but what do you or drivers consider to be good communication practices? So if I'm to summarize it, David, and you tell me if this is wrong or if I'm missing things, it's that having multiple ways to communicate, communicating what like to groups at large, but also in smaller groups or one-to-one. And then anytime you are communicating, making sure that you are telling people, here's what we heard and here's what we did. Are there any other aspects around what you'd consider good communication practices?
Well, I think any communication is good communication. Obviously, coming from the perspective of the corporate office back to the drivers, you really have to make sure that you train your people how to communicate. I do a course here with Averitt where how to communicate on the Qualcomm. And I know some people's got PeopleNet, got Qualcomm, whatever you have, but you probably got something in the truck to communicate back and forth. And when I talked about this in the past at conferences, sometimes I'll say, Qualcomm and those things are always great ways to pass information. So you got to be careful what you put in a message if you're going to send a message to the driver like that, because it'll always it could be taken out of context. They don't know whether they could take it as you being mean. Anything in type, it's really hard to make a good communication. We encourage all of our fleet managers to call drivers and do it on use a Qualcomm if you're passing information back and forth, but you need to communicate. You need to communicate on the phone, and obviously face to face when you get the opportunities is the best way to communicate. And I think providing multiple ways for drivers to communicate to you is key. Some drivers just don't want to type stuff out. They're just real old school maybe. I'm kind of old school, 64, but provide ways for the drivers to make it easy to communicate. We do cookouts and we're out in front of the drivers face to face. The Facebook is a great way to communicate. You can do Facebook Live. It's really simple. We do the podcast, every 2 weeks, got a new podcast hitting where we're dropping something out. All those ways of communication, anything you can communicate, that's going to the driver, but allow the drivers to call back. When we're making these wellness checks, we're always telling the driver, say, hey, at the end of the day, call us. Here, if you got a question, here's my phone number, send it to you. When we answer the Qualcomm, when we answer messages on Workhound, if Emily, for instance, is answering a question on Workhound, she'll tell them, say, hey, it's Emily Emery. Here's my phone number. Call me if you got any questions. So we keep providing the information so that they can reach back out to us. That's vital. They got to have more than one way to do it, though.
I appreciate you sharing that. So the next question we have is around what Averitt's doing around attracting women drivers, and then what percentage of your drivers are women? Is there anything there that you can speak to?
It's getting close to 10%. We're working on that all the time. We're involved in the Women in Trucking thing, the conferences. I think what we found, and some of this is feedback from Workhound, where we can take a look at when they reveal, or sometimes you can tell by the comment that it's female. Safety is probably the highest thing on the chart for them to feel safe when they're at a facility or driving and things like that. So we're always looking how can we improve that? And we have a little bit of advantage because we have service centers, so they don't have to go to truck stops. That's the toughest part about the female driving part of it. As far as the driving part of it, I think that I've got great drivers that are females. I'd like to have 100 of them. The ability's there. How do you attract them? Again, the same thing. We use the females a lot of times to communicate with us. I'll do podcasts with female drivers and talk about things like that. But they got to feel safe where they're working at. And if you can do that, that's a key. Most of them are a little leery, of parking at a truck stop if they can't, going in and taking showers sometimes, comfortable with that. So there's a lot of issues that come up with that. But the hard part of it is obviously, I think, how do you make them safe? How do you make them feel safe? part of it is keeping your equipment clean too. The female side of it, they don't like breakdowns any more than I know male drivers don't like it either. Female drivers like it worse. They don't want to be broke down on the side of the interstate at night going down the road. So if you can keep your equipment maintained and tell them you've got good, that's a good marketing strategy. Is to if you've got newer equipment, 2 years old, that's a good marketing strategy for them as well.
No, that. I appreciate you sharing that. And we're about to wrap up here. But before we do, one of the things I did want to share was I was catching up with Jerome, who works closely with you guys, and one of the things he shared about working with Averitt team was that the spirit of empathy. You guys have a spirit of empathy that is unrivaled by other companies, and that when you guys say that you care, you really mean it. And so I just wanted to make sure to pass that along, that our team certainly enjoys getting a chance to work with you all. We're a feedback company, so your feedback certainly helped make us a better company, helped us build a better product. So David, I just want to thank you for that. And for everyone attending, if we can be helpful to you all, please reach out. My email's on here as well as David's. Happy to talk retention strategies, feedback strategies, whatever's on your mind. But David, I just want to say thanks for being a part of this conversation. And if anyone has any other questions, give us a holler. But otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. Thank you all so much, and hope you have a good one.
Thank you, Max. I appreciate it. And again, you built a really good company. Y'all are great. If you people are listening here, reach out. If you want to talk to me one-on-one about my experiences with Workhound and what how we can fit, feel free to reach out. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. But again, Matt, appreciate everything you've done with Workhound and what you've done with Averitt. Y'all have been a great partner for us, and we look forward to a long-term partnership with you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. We'll catch you later. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Matt. You have a great day.
Thanks.